I'm going to share with you one of the most painful memories that I have on record. It's not something that I love to revisit, but it's something that is important to share so that you can grow from my mistakes. There's a certain sound that a call from a jail cell makes. I had never been on the sending or receiving end of that call until July 2nd, 2015. In this instance, I was calling my closest friend, a man who I had known and loved for 15 years. I had supported him through many broken relationships, many challenging mushroom experiences. He was a man of wealth. So when I was in that jail cell and I had no one else to call, I had no doubt that he would answer. Now, if you're not familiar with what those calls sound like, it's an automated recording. In my case, from the Orange County Jail, I dialed the number. I heard the beeps. I heard the ring. I heard him pick up. And immediately, that automated voice says, "You have a collect call from the Orange County Jail." Then I get to speak. Eric, do you accept? I anticipated I was going to be telling him the story of my arrest, and he would be coming to my aid without question. Instead, he hung up. It must be a mistake, I thought. This couldn't be. Friend of 15 years, my closest friend. So I called back. Same thing. I called back. The same thing. 10 times I called this individual, and 10 times he hung up. It was one of the most painful and terrifying experiences of my life. I had always picked up for him. I had always been there for him. So I hung up the phone and I cried. I had no idea what I was going to do. Now, this episode is not simply to tell my story. This episode is to encourage you to ask, who's going to pick up for you? Now, I did have 3 individuals who came through. They weren't the most likely ones either. I suspect that the same for you may very well be true. So who picks up for you? Not when it's time to go on the boat, not when it's time to hit the club. Who picks up at 2 a.m. when you are in need? If you don't have an answer for that question, then it is of the utmost importance that you sit with this conversation, because odds are you're the person that picks up for them. If you're a founder, a builder, a creative, then you're probably the one that answers the phone. And it is imperative that you have someone who will answer your call. I was that guy. For 15 years, I held strong for this individual. I have been the man who holds space for others through their most challenging life experiences. I have sat through literally tens of thousands of hours supporting individuals through some of their most profound, powerful, and challenging sacred mushroom journeys. To think that I had surrounded myself by individuals who would not do the same for me, it was an ontological shock, quite honestly. Now, what's really behind this problem, for those of us who are leaders, professionals, people who are at the tip of the spear, is that somewhere along the way, we confused being needed with being loved. All of those times that I showed up for this individual, supporting him through breakup after breakup, bad decision after bad decision, I thought that his reliance on me was a display of love. But when it came down to it, it was not. You see, being needed is being in a role. Being loved is being in a relationship. Now, we all play roles. That's not to say that we should dismiss this as a part of who we are and the life that we live. But we all need love. I'm inviting you to explore in your life where you have that love. Again, for me, it showed up in some of the most unlikely places. When I finally got out of jail, which it took me a week, the most touching example that I had, something I had been taught was not real as a child, was the love of my dog. It's hard for me to believe, and I haven't really thought about it in this lens. But as a child, I grew up being told that dogs were basically children that never matured. That if you had a dog, then you were burdened for your life. So I never grew up with a pet dog. When I moved to the farm, it felt imperative to me that I have an animal there that could look out for my family when I wasn't home, keep out an eye out at night, bark when unfamiliar cars, or in Smokey's case, even very familiar cars, showed up. And I was incarcerated for a week. And when I came home, that dog was on the porch and was so excited to see me. I could cry right now thinking about that. He held me when there was no one else to. I'm so happy to say that I got to support and love that dog for 15 years of his life, from the time he was 6 weeks old until he was 15. I got to return that favor of love to that animal. I got to be in relationship with that being. His ashes are still on my altar over here. Another person that came through for me was a friend from high school. He was a Japanese exchange student that I grew to love a great deal. Growing up in central Kentucky, you don't get a lot of cultural diversity. And so when there was a young Japanese boy who showed up in our Catholic high school, barely speaking any English, I could not resist an opportunity to get to know this guy. And I'm so grateful that I did, because he became one of my best friends and the only person who supported me financially in that challenge. This individual who I called from the jail, like I said, he was independently wealthy. He had inherited a great deal of money. I had spent years watching him purchase an entire lineup of Air Jordans that he had in his bedroom, like an altar. In all my years struggling with money, I never once asked him for help. And the one time that I did, he hung up 10 times. But my friend from Japan, whose name I won't mention just because he is a very successful businessman, I called him and he came through. Without a moment's hesitation, he sent me a check to help me get by for well over 2 months. The other person who came through was someone that everyone around me tried to convince me that she wouldn't. That was my then girlfriend and now wife. Now, Courtney, my beloved, is 12 years younger than me. At the time, she was 23 years old. She had everything to lose and very little to gain by continuing to support me. Her attorney was trying to get her to turn on me. He was attempting to persuade her to basically just point the finger at me, saying I had convinced her to do this thing that she didn't want to do, but she refused to. She took ownership for her role. She did everything that she could to support me in that time. She stood up, even though she, again, had everything to lose. That was integrity. She wasn't performing. She was being. She was being love. She was being in integrity. And this is where I want us to all explore. Because right now in my life, when I look around, I know that there are only a handful of people who actually will show up when it really matters, who will answer the phone. I want you to imagine yourself on that other line, sending the call. This is the time that you are in need. Do you get the click? Do you hear the hang up? Or do you hear a hello? Who do you call and receive that hello? This is very important for us to consider. I found out who was there for me. It was not the people who I thought. As a matter of fact, this individual who I thought was on my side, this is an important detail, not for necessarily my story, but to understand that this is how most people operate. This individual, after hanging up on me, called Courtney and had the nerve to ask what he could do to help. She said, get him out of jail. You've got money. Help him. It was only $10,000. I had $3,000. I just needed $7,000 more. That was nothing for this person. He didn't respond to her then, and he never helped me out. He actually contacted my partner asking what he could do to help and didn't. This is the lip service that most people give. Now, here's the reality is that most people also have people that they will show up for. The challenging reality is that most people in your life are not them. Most people are not willing to foot the bill of sticking their neck out for just anybody. It's not necessarily a flaw in the individual, but it does require us to really assess in our lives who's real, who's really going to show up. Nobody's a bad friend on a good day, but on a bad day, who's a good friend? For me, it was Smokey, my dog. He didn't have any food. He had drank from the pond, I guess. Found out later that my neighbor was one day away from taking him to the pound. Thank God he waited. My friend, who I hadn't at that time seen in probably 7 or so years, I called him and he showed up. Courtney, 23, by most accounts, very immature. Yet she had lived a life nurtured in love. Her family showed her what it meant to show up when people need each other. She was a competitive ice skater growing up. She grew up in the East End, one of the more affluent neighborhoods at that time in the area. She didn't need to be wrapped up with me in a 3 felony situation. It breaks my heart when I consider that I in any way subjected her. Yes, of course, she made the decision to participate with me, but I recognize that I was already on that path. These are not easy memories, and I suspect that for you, there are similar memories where you can look back and see that there were people who did not show up like you had expected them to. People who you thought loved you, and yet they didn't. People who you thought were loyal, and yet they weren't. This is something for us who are leaders. We really need to consider this. For one, we're vulnerable. It's uncomfortable to realize, but as a leader, you are inherently exposed. Another lesson that I had to learn in life in this capacity is who to share private information with. We all have private lives, and we all make mistakes in our private lives. When you are the person on a pedestal, or at least others put you on the pedestal, those mistakes become ammunition. And so it becomes very important to consider. Now, I've known so many people over the years who have had friends for decades who ended up betraying them. One business person that I worked with in Jamaica, very successful, had a friend of, I believe it was like 35 or 40 years, who ended up over some minor discrepancy suing him for $5 million. It completely caught him off guard. Some of this we can't prepare ourselves for, and some of it we can see. My friend who didn't pick up the phone, there were absolutely times over the years when I saw red flags, when I saw, you know what? I'm in a struggle right now, and he's not even listening to me. I'm trying to share with him a pain point, and he's just not listening. And I just dismissed it. I just chalked it up to someone who had a short attention span. People that love us, it's not about attention span. The people that love us are with us. We don't need to ask them to pay attention when we're sharing a challenging circumstance. We don't need to ask them for permission to be vulnerable. We don't need to remind them not to look at their phone when we're sharing something of great importance. So I want you to ask yourself, how many of these people do you have in your life? Obviously, we're not talking about Facebook friends here. We're not talking about people who like your photos. We're not talking about people who share your content. Those of you that participate in that way with this content, I thank you a great deal. And I have to recognize that doesn't bring us into relationship. Hopefully there is material that I share that's valuable that you want others to be exposed to. Hopefully this story resonates with someone and they feel like they would like someone in their life to hear it as well, because it's a very important consideration. But we have to be clear about where our boundaries are. We have to be clear about what our relationships are. In the workplace, as leaders, that becomes potentially blurry. People look up to you. Don't mistake that for love. In our world, we talk a lot about networks, our social networks, our business networks. What I learned that was a painful realization for me that translates is that networks are transactional. Networks consist of people who are trying to mutually benefit. That's not a criticism. There's not anything wrong with that. But by design, that is transactional. And when it comes down to transactions, well, we can just expect that even ourselves are not going to show up when it requires investment, when it requires commitment. Transactions come and go. Relationships should be built to last. Love should be built to last. And maybe because you've been the one that's always been giving as a leader, as a creative, maybe it's never been tested for you. Maybe you've never had to call on someone in the dead of night. Maybe you've never had to rely on someone else to save your ass. That day will come. It comes for all of us. Make sure you have at least one person. That's a scary thing to realize. It's something that has really struck me powerfully in the last couple of years even. It's really built around this concept of networks. You know, you think when you have a network that that's a safety net. It's really not. One of the greatest teachers who I follow, David Guillaume, shares that if you have one or two people in your life that you can really rely on to show up when you need it, then you are blessed. I have found that to be true. I have found that to be absolutely true. Most people maybe have one. To have two or more is an incredible blessing that we should be incredibly thankful for. How can you find out? How can you find out who's really there for you? Well, this is where I would encourage you to do what is maybe counterintuitive. Ask for help, maybe even when you don't need it. Just see who shows up. And I don't mean help with a project. I don't mean help with some task that you're trying to accomplish that will be of service to your business or out there in the world. I'm talking about ask for help personally. Ask for someone that will listen and not respond. Someone who will hear you without providing advice. Someone who will show up when you really need it. This may be the thing that is preventing you from really deeply knowing your value and your resources. We very often put our value on what we do for others. But in many ways, how we see others show up for us is what really illustrates our value to others. I didn't share this story in any way for you to feel bad for me. I am so grateful that all of these things have happened, and there have been so many more experiences like this of individuals who I thought were there for me, who clearly were not. I hold no grudge for them. I don't want you to walk away from this conversation feeling like you should feel any type of animosity towards people who don't show up. That friend who didn't answer the call did me one of the biggest favors that I've ever received. He helped me see that I can't trust what I can see, but I can trust what I feel. I felt in my heart over years that he wasn't listening. He wasn't really there for me. But he showed up. He came to my house. He loved for me to cook dinner. He loved to hang out and let me listen to him. I trusted my eyes and not my heart. So again, I want to encourage you and I want to challenge you this week. Ask someone for help. Start with someone who you maybe have questions in. Will they really show up for me? Ask them to do something for you. You deserve it. Ask them to be a support to you. You're worthy of it. You need to know who will show up for you. Don't wait until you're in jail. Or worse, because believe me, we all know it can get worse. If you're looking for a community, if you're looking for a place of belonging, where not everybody will show up for you, but maybe you will find people who will, and I would encourage you to check out Psanctuary. It is a network, but it's a network that's full of caring people. And you may find one there, just one more. If you have just one more person that you can add to your list of people who will show up for you, how much more blessed can you be? Thank you for your time and attention. Be blessed. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Eric Osborne Podcast.